Hey there, planners. If you love stressful Mondays that feel hectic and chaotic and like your head is on fire, then this video isn't for you. You can go ahead and click off and go do something else. But if you hate that feeling, then stick around because we're going to be talking about a weekly review process that helps Mondays feel less chaotic. You come to the week prepared. So go grab your planners and let's get planning. So I have been using some form of weekly review for years, and it is one of the most critical tools in my planning toolbox to help me feel prepared and ready for the week ahead. And let's be honest, sometimes Mondays have emergencies. Things happen over the weekend, or there's an emergent deadline. And if you don't come into the week prepared and then those emergent items hit, it's just the snowball effect, and you get to the end of the week and just aren't really sure what you even accomplished. And so I like to avoid that as much as possible. And so I use a review process at the end of the week. I also use one on a monthly, quarterly, and annual basis, but it's that weekly review that really helps ground me in getting things done and smooth transition from one week to the other. On average, I spend about 30 minutes in my weekly review process at the end of the week every Friday. It may take a bit longer if you're just starting out, and that's okay. You'll find your rhythm with it. I'm going to be offering a freebie for you to help you establish your weekly review process, so stay tuned to the end of the video to make sure you can pick up that freebie, and all of the supplies that I'm using are going to be linked down in the description box below. I will say you will see references to some of the elements from the Getting Things Done system. The Getting Things Done method is a fantastic system. I recently read the book and realized that I have actually been doing parts and pieces of that system without really knowing it for years, and now I have like official names, things to call it. And so I will have a link down in the description box below to that book. If you have not read it, I highly recommend it. It just gives you some great foundational items and also names some of the things that you're probably already doing. So you will see some elements of that. But again, I've been doing a weekly review process long before I knew about that system, and I have kind of developed my own method over the years. You will do the same as you start to use this process, and you'll find that it really helps you come into the week prepared, focused on those highest priority items, the things that are going to help you accomplish your larger goals. Here's what a typical week in my work planner looks like. Now, this is not an actual snapshot of my work planner because the work that I do is confidential and I could not share it on this YouTube channel. So I have just recreated an example of what that information looks like, and this is exactly how it would be set up. I use washi tape at the top of the page as a color coding system so that as I'm flipping back through my planner, I can quickly see what month I'm in. So for example, June is a yellow month, so I would have yellow washi tape at the top, and that just helps me with flipping. I use date headers for the days of the week to indicate where I'm shifting days, and you can see I just rapid log. So I use a highlighter to indicate the heading for a meeting, and then I'm just making bullet points for notes, things I need to remember, and I also will have these boxes for things I need to do, action items. And I'm also using a statusing system. So if you see a box completely closed in, that means that I already completed that action. You'll see some that are either delegated, but indicated by an arrow pointing down, or they're open, meaning they have not been completed. Maybe they're halfway filled in, which means I started some, but I have not completed them all. So you'll see different indicators, but this is very typical of what getting to the end of my week would look like in my planner. I would have items left undone. I would have notes, starred items, things I really need to remember, things like that. So what do I do with this, all of this information at the end of the week, so I don't have to keep coming back and reading every one of these items in all the previous weeks? I use my weekly review process. And so I have created this checklist for myself that is a very quick reference for me about the 3 steps that I take during my weekly review process every week. I printed it out and laminated it so that I can just pop it in a folder or in the back of my planner. And when I get to the end of the week, I pull this out and set it on my desk and I start going through this. Now, I have been doing this for so long, I probably have this memorized and don't really need to have it out on my desk, but I still pull it out every week because I don't want to skip any of these steps. I want to make sure I'm reminding myself and walking through very methodically every step for the weekly review. And that helps me be consistent because I know this works. This works for me. This helps me get very prepared to close out all the actions from the previous week and be very prepared walking into the second week. So I'm going to step through each of these steps and kind of show you what it would look like when I do my weekly review and how it sets me up for the week ahead. All right, so the first step for my weekly review is to clean up. And that means to clean up physically and electronically. So the first thing I do is I clean up my workspace. Now, this is not a good representation because this is a very clean area, but typically by the end of the week, I've got sticky notes stuck places. I might have pens and other notes or files, things all around, just kind of a cluttered area. So the first thing I do is I clear away all the clutter. I also sort all the documents, the papers, and the sticky notes. As you can see, workspace is the first area on my checklist, and I make sure everything is clean. And that just, it helps kind of trigger my brain. Okay, we are cleaning up, we are refreshing, we are restarting for the week ahead. The next area that I clean up is my planner. So I will actually go back through my planner for the week and just read through everything. If anything stands out, like maybe when I read this note, I go, oh, you know what? There was an action item there to call Bob next week. Right? So I'll go ahead and capture that. And sometimes when you get to the end of the week and you take that time to reflect, something that you noted in your planner, actually now you understand by the end of the week, that's an action, or I need to do something with that next week. I also might find, you know, I had an action item that I closed sometime through the week and I need to status that correctly. So I make sure everything is statused correctly. I capture any other action items that I may not have clearly stated. If anything needs, you know, a bit more detail. So for example, this says track to completion. Maybe it's by Q3 end. So I would add that in just as a note to myself as I'm preparing to close out all of these items. So really going through, noting anything that's been delegated. If I have assigned a task to someone else, or a task has been assigned to me, I will capture that. Anything that's canceled or completed, I would make sure to status that. So really cleaning up the planner, and that's the next item on my checklist. The third item on the cleanup section is electronically cleaning up, and that is getting to inbox 0 in your email inbox. And I know for some folks that is a pretty scary thought. I took the time probably 2 years ago to really get to inbox 0. And I cannot tell you how refreshing that is. Seeing that inbox with what I had over 1,000 emails in my inbox at the time that I really started to sit down and get to 0. And it was overwhelming. And I actually worked on it over the weekend because it took so long. But once you do that, it is so much easier to track and maintain incoming items. So how I do this on a weekly basis is I start by sorting all the emails in my inbox. My inbox is a temporary place for things to sit. Nothing stays in my inbox. And so as I'm going through each email, I am completing anything that takes less than 2 minutes. So if I just need to quickly respond to something and say, yes, that sounds great, or, you know, here's the document you're looking for, I go ahead and respond to that if it takes less than 2 minutes. If anything is going to take more than 2 minutes, like I have to go do some research, or, you know, I've got to reach out to 2 or 3 people, that's an action item, and I will capture it as an action item. I move all emails in my inbox into one of 3 folders, and that is to read later. So if I have something that's like a really meaty information and I need to read it, I will put it in a file called, in my inbox, called to read. And I actually block time out on my schedule to do just that, go through the emails and read them. I have another folder called waiting on, and that's for something in my inbox that I'm really waiting for someone else to do something before I can take my action, or I can file it or close it out. So I put it in there, and I also block time for myself to go through my waiting on folder to make sure everything is correctly statused. And then anything that I need to take action on that's going to take longer than 2 minutes, I put in my take action folder. So now I've got everything sorted in those 3 key folders. Anything else that I don't put in one of these 3 folders either gets filed just as a record to remember, or it gets deleted. So that's really the options for my inbox. I take the time during my weekly review to sort out and get to 0 in my inbox. I want to end my week with nothing in my inbox waiting. All right, now that I've got everything processed, both physically and electronically, it is time to move to step 2, which is my brain dump. And you guys know how much I love a good brain dump. It is a critical part of my weekly review process. So I actually pull out my brain dump triggers. Now, the way I have set this up is I actually put the brain dump triggers that I use for work on the back of my checklist. So this is laminated, and I have them right here to use as part of my weekly review process. I pull out my brain dump triggers, and I turn to a blank page in my notebook and go ahead and set up the space for a brain dump. All right, so you can see I've set up the spot for my brain dump, and it is not fancy. It is simply a title, brain dump, and the date that I'm doing it, and that's all I need. It doesn't have to be fancy because everything I capture here is going to end up somewhere else. This is just really a chance for me to empty my brain. So I set a timer for at least 10 minutes. For me, 10 minutes is a great amount of time. As you are implementing a weekly review process for the first time, you may need a lot more than 10 minutes, particularly if you have not ever used a weekly review process before. So you might want to go for 15 or 20 or more. Really test this out if this is the first time you're doing this. But I think it's very important to set the timer, because what I have realized over the years is if I just go with the brain dump until I feel like I'm done, inevitably it's not enough time. Forcing myself to sit there without being able to move on to the next activity and think about other things. For the first 5 minutes, I really get all the things that are right on the top of my brain. I have this weird pause where nothing is happening for maybe a minute or 2, and then all of a sudden, lots more ideas start coming out, and they are the more creative, the deeper thought, the more strategic items, because I'm forcing myself to fill that full space and I cannot move on to the next activity. So I really encourage you to use a timer during this time. I'm going to go ahead and show you what the brain dump might look like. I'm going to set my timer for 10 minutes and do a brain dump. All right, so using my brain dump checklist, I have made a list of all the items that were just in my brain. Some of these items are like immediate go-dos. Some of them are kind of topical areas that have a lot of sub-bullets. Some of them are, questions that I'm asking that I need to go investigate. It's just everything in my head. I used my full 10 minutes. A couple of things to keep in mind, and I actually have this on my checklist. Things I want to avoid while I'm doing this. I want to avoid distractions. So I put my phone on mute. I silence my incoming notifications from email. I want to avoid doing the work. So a lot of times I'll come up with something on my brain dump list that really I'm motivated to go ahead and get started on it, but I want to avoid actually doing the work while I'm doing this brain dump. The brain dump time is sacred. Whether it's 10 minutes or 15 minutes or 30 minutes, an hour, whatever it takes you, that time is sacred, and you want to protect it because you are emptying your brain of all the things that are floating around in there that need to be captured in your planning system. I also try not to judge items. So I might put down an item on here that is just kind of a random thought. And I don't want to judge that. I don't want to make the decision, oh, that doesn't belong on here. I capture everything. I let it all flow out to get it down. And then I can judge and distinguish and prioritize later. The point is to allow yourself the freedom to really empty everything floating around in your brain. So no judging and no filtering. Those are kind of reminders to myself as I'm doing this process to really get all the things in my head out. So now that I have my brain dump done, I'm ready to move to step 3, which is to set up next week. So in my planner, I'm going to go ahead and set up the format for next week. All right, so now I've set up my week. So if you're not using a planner in a notebook style, if you have a printed planner or a ring planner and you've got inserts in there, you would just flip to whatever is the next week in your planner, depending on the style. For me, I've set up a week at a glance page, which includes kind of key dates, meetings, times, things I need to just make sure stay on my radar for this week. I also set up a master task list and a goals section. And I start with the goals section. So as I kind of think about all the things that I need to get done over the next week, and thinking about my monthly goals and my quarterly goals, what are the things that I need to get done? I stick with 3. 3 is the magic number. A lot of people use 3. So I will just set up 3 goals. Once I have those defined and written out, then I will start building my master task list. And the way I do that, I just look back at my weekly setup checklist. I start with populating the master task list from any items that were unfinished from the previous week. So, for example, I've got a list here. About half of the items are complete. These other items I would move over into my master task list, and I just go through everything that's not complete from the previous week and put that on the master task list. The next place I'll look is my brain dump. So I want to go ahead and pull out anything that I can get done this week from my brain dump and put that here in my master task list. Not everything from the brain dump is going to go in this week's master task list. So what do we do with the other items? Well, there's a couple of options. You can keep a someday maybe or a later list. I keep one of those in the front of all of my planners, and anything that I want to maintain, but I don't want to get to anytime soon, like the next 7 days, I will pull into the someday maybe list, and I check that regularly. So as I'm setting up my master task list, I will flip over to my someday maybe list and pull any items into there. So that's one place things can go. Another place things can go is if I've identified something that is an action, but it has multiple steps. To me, that's a project. That's more than just a go do on a master task list. So I will actually look into setting up a project specific for that. And having a good project system is an excellent tool as part of your planning system. I use the definition of projects from the getting things done method, and that is anything that has more than 1 or 2 steps as part of it, that is a project. And so I would go ahead and move this item to my projects list and start mapping out what that looks like and figuring out how to schedule it getting done. The other thing is you may have something on here that just was a random thought in your brain and you don't need to take any action on it. I like to keep my brain dumps. I don't put them on pieces of paper that I'm going to throw away. I like to put my brain dumps in my planner because I like to come back to them. And so occasionally, once a quarter at least, I will go back through all of my brain dumps and look at the items that are not checked off. And you can see every item that I put in my brain dump, I actually have my little square there. So once I move things to a task list, I will check it off like this. If I put it in a project system, I will check it off like this. Anything that I've decided I don't really need to take any action on, I will just draw a line through. And so when I come back at a future date and kind of glance over anything that's not complete, I would be able to decide, is now the right time, or, do I just need to go ahead and cancel that? So that's how I build my major my master task list for the week. And that brings us to the end of the weekly review. So now I've got everything statused from the prior week. I don't need to look back on this week anymore because everything has been statused and moved into the master task list or scheduled on the calendar or somewhere else in my system. So that last week is closed out. I've done my brain dump. I've emptied my head of everything floating around in there and processed it into my planning system in some way. And I've set up what the week ahead is going to look like. What are my goals? What are the master tasks that I need to get done this week? And I'm ready. When I come in on Monday morning, I just need to look at this page. I just need to come right here. It's all set up and ready for me. I don't have to flip back to last week to see, what was that thing that I didn't get done. It's all right here and ready for me. All right, so that brings us to the end of my weekly review process. I really hope this was helpful for you, and to help you take the next step to really get started with your weekly review, I want to make this checklist and my brain dump checklist available to you for free. You can go check this out on the Planning Annie Instagram page in the link for freebies. I'll have that link down below so that you can get there. Make sure that you follow me while you're there. But this is a great tool to get you up and running. Now, if you've never done a weekly review before, you may find that these don't actually, you need to add some things or delete some things, or maybe the brain dump checklist doesn't include things that you need to include. I encourage you to make your own. Really customize this and make it your own process so that you can get comfortable with it. And I do update my process every now and then as things change, or I go into a new position, or I have new assignments. I will update it to reflect those changes. But this should be a great tool to help you get started. It's simple. It maps out what you need to do, and as you begin to use it, you will really get into a routine with it and be able to customize it for your needs. So definitely go check out this and grab that freebie for yourself. I would love to hear from you. Do you use a weekly review process to get you ready for the week ahead and to close out the current week? If so, what are the elements in your process? What should I be thinking about considering and adding to my process? I would love to hear all about your weekly review if you're using one. If you haven't ever used one, are you thinking about going to grab this freebie and starting one? I would love to hear that down in the comments below. Give this video a thumbs up if you got value out of it, and subscribe to Planning Annie for more content like this. As always, thanks for planning with me.